What do you make of this ban on TikTok?
Well, the U.S. changed its rules on foreign participation in the American market to protect data the end of last year. And, of course, COVID has taken the spotlight off of things like this. Now it looks like the U.S. is getting around to enforcing those rules. And we don't really know what the pattern is yet. The president says he's going to ban TikTok, but then he doesn't do it. Microsoft could buy TikTok. This is a precedent-setting event. It won't just apply to TikTok. It'll apply to other Chinese companies that gather information about American citizens. And if Microsoft is able to strike a deal, that'll be a precedent as well, what you have to do if you have to sell your assets. So the administration is taking a long time because as important as TikTok is, this goes beyond TikTok.
Is this about national security? Is this about privacy protection? What is it about?
That's a really important question they have to answer. My own view is that this really should be about privacy protection. That's a change in U.S. law that we had last year. It's going to change the way the U.S. treats a lot of foreign companies. If it's about national security, you would think that the U.S. would be able to put restrictions on TikTok, for example, on use by people who have security clearances in the American government or in other sensitive positions, and wouldn't have to ban TikTok. So that's an important thing for the administration to make clear. Are you protecting consumer data or are you protecting national security?
Derek, it's rich in Hong Kong, be it Huawei, TikTok, or perhaps even WeChat. The question is that the administration hasn't produced a smoking gun, have they?
No, but that's a very important question, if this is about national security. If the president makes an announcement this week saying, I'm protecting national security, you need to say, especially in the TikTok case, what national security risk is there? Passing around these videos, where's the national security risk? If he says instead, we don't trust Chinese companies to protect consumer data, I don't think you need a smoking gun. I think you can say that the rules in China on protecting consumer data are completely different, and Chinese parents are not a good custodian. Chinese parent companies are not a good custodian of American consumer data. So which way they go here matters to whether they need a smoking gun.
Oh, all right, Derek. Well, that's where we are with this. Can we put your other hat on, your beige book hat, as it were, and tell us how you would describe the state of the American economy now?
The American economy or the Chinese economy?
The American economy.
Well, I mean, in economies that are having still not just outbreaks in certain cases, but widespread COVID outbreaks like the United States, you're going to get terrible GDP numbers. GDP, after all, is an activity measure. You have to engage in transactions, and COVID means you stop transactions. So on the one hand, in the American economy, you have this terrible GDP report for the second quarter, just unprecedented in how bad it is. But at the same time, reported income from Americans has gone up because of government support. So we have the possibility of a very sharp recovery, but we don't know when it's going to occur. It can't occur until COVID is actually under control at the national level. So, we're going to get very bad GDP probably through the third quarter because we don't have COVID under control. If we can get it under control, fourth quarter GDP will soar.
Derek, the fundamental question is how long, if we get fresh waves and waves upon waves of COVID, how much can governments, how much can countries really afford ultimately in keeping stimulus going, or what I prefer to call it is it's triage in effect?
Right. It's not really stimulus. You're just supporting people. Stimulus would mean that we've got a recovery coming out of this government support, which we won't. I mean, the recovery has to come from solving the COVID problem. And, yeah, there are a lot of countries that are not going to be able to do this. It's going to require global debt coordination with the U.S., with the IMF, with Europe, with China. In the American case, of course, the threat isn't that. The dollar is the reserve currency. So we can continue to borrow a lot of money. The threat is longer term. Are we changing the international monetary system in the U.S. by borrowing so much money to counteract the effects of COVID? So we have a system threat here in the U.S. that we're facing, but it's in the long term. Other countries have a short-term threat that has to be addressed by international cooperation.
Derek, there's also the inability for the Democrat and Republicans to come to some sort of consensus when it comes to the stimulus going forward. I mean, what risk does that bring?
Yeah, it's very hard. I'm in Washington. It's very hard to believe that incumbents won't come to an agreement because there's obviously a big gap between the Democratic and Republican parties, but there's also a big gap between incumbents and challengers. And if you're an incumbent, you're taking a big risk standing on principle right now because your challenger is going to blame the other party, but they're also going to blame you. And so I think we're going to get some sort of deal. It won't be comprehensive. It'll be patchwork. It'll just be buying time. Unfortunately, I think that's where American politics is now. We're going to have a bunch of patchwork deals until we can start get distribution of a vaccine and the American economy can really recover. But I don't think we'll get some, breakdown where they don't pass anything because that's not in the interest of any incumbent, Republican or Democratic.
Derek, isn't it about the worst year or time to be having these arguments with all the politicking going on ahead of November?
Yeah, I mean, there's never a good time to have these arguments, and there's never a good time to make policy in an election year, and we've managed to combine the two of them. We're not going to look back on this time and think that the U.S. had a strategy. We're going to look back on this time and think that the U.S. sort of lurched from solution to solution, putting Band-Aids on everything. I've said this before. I think the best economic result we can get is speeding up vaccine distribution because the economic policy that we're adopting is not going to be good and it's not going to solve the problem. Only really vaccine distribution is going to solve the problem.